When they dragged Ifeanyi out that night, he didn't even wear slippers. Rain was falling small, and the police torchlight was shining on his face as if he was a thief. I ran after them, shouting, saying he didn't do anything. Chief Obikwe stood by his gate with his wrapper tied across his chest, shouting that my husband was the one who burnt his generator. Nobody listened to me. The whole compound came out to watch. Some whispered that Ifeanyi was too quiet to fight anybody, but nobody spoke up loud. That was the night. Everything changed in my life. Before that night, our life was small but peaceful. We lived in one corner of the compound, a small room with one bed, one sewing machine, and one fan that hardly turned. Ifeanyi was a tailor, and even though he didn't make plenty money, he worked hard. I sold a kara in front of the compound every morning. Our children, Chidera and Ebube, would sit near me with school uniform that Ifeanyi sewed himself. Things were not perfect, but we were managing. Then Chief Obikwe moved into the compound. He built a big house inside the same yard, painted it cream and gold, with a tall fence and security man. From the first day he started using that generator, peace left our life. The sound of that thing was louder than thunder. It started every night by 8 o'clock and didn't stop till morning. The noise shook the zinc on our roof and made Ifeanyi's sewing machine jump on the table whenever he tried to sew at night. At first, Ifeanyi said we should endure, that one day light would come back stable and we wouldn't hear it again. But weeks turned to months and the noise became worse. I started losing customers because I was always tired in the morning. The children couldn't sleep well. The baby started coughing because the smoke from the generator entered our room. I went to the gate one night and called out to the chief's gateman, begging him to tell Oga to off the generator small so my children could sleep. Chief himself came out that night. He laughed when he saw me. He said poor people like us don't like to see others enjoy. He asked me if generator noise killed anybody before. My eyes were red that night, but Ifeanyi came and pulled me back, saying I should leave it. After that day, I stopped talking about the noise, but inside me, I started praying for peace. Just one night of peace. Then one Thursday it happened. The generator did not start. At first, we thought maybe fuel finished. The whole compound was quiet, the air cool, no noise. Ifeanyi smiled for the first time in weeks. He said he would finish the senator clothes that night before morning. The children slept early. I sat by the window, just happy to hear silence again, but around midnight, people started shouting. Smoke was rising from the back of Chief's house. Fire, the same generator house, was burning. Ifeanyi jumped up and ran outside to help pour water, but the fire was too much. Before morning, the generator was gone, the wall beside it black like charcoal. By sunrise, the chief was walking around, shouting that the poor wanted to destroy him. Before noon, police came and picked my husband, and they said somebody saw him near the fence that night. I told them he was inside the room with me, sewing. They pushed me away. That was how they carried him off barefooted. That was how my nightmare started. When they took Ifeanyi away that morning, I followed the police van barefooted. My wrapper was almost falling off, and my eyes were swollen from crying. I kept shouting that my husband was innocent, but nobody answered me. People stood by the roadside, watching like it was one kind movie. The police entered the station and told me to go home, that I should come back later. They said they were still questioning him. I waited outside the gate until evening, but they didn't let me see him. That night, the compound was quiet in a way that felt heavy. The smell of burnt plastic still filled the air. Chief's house was dark, but I could see torchlight moving around inside. Some people came to console me, but many avoided my room as if bad luck was inside. My Akara customers didn't show up the next morning. The children didn't go to school. I sat by the window, staring at the gate, hoping to see my husband walking back home. After 2 days, I went back to the station with small food in a nylon. The officer at the counter looked at me like I was disturbing him. He said Ifeanyi had already been charged with arson and taken to the prison. He said Chief Obikwe had written statement against him and that they even found one piece of burnt cloth near the fence that matched the kind of cloth Ifeanyi used to sew. I stood there like someone dreaming. I tried to explain that my husband was working that night, that he never left the room. The man just waved his hand and told me to go and find lawyer if I had strength. When I got home that day, I couldn't feel my legs again. I sat on the bed, holding the sewing machine and crying. Chidera, my small girl, came to sit beside me and asked when Papa would come home. I didn't know what to tell her. Weeks passed. I sold small things to pay for food. People in the compound started avoiding me. Some said I should pack out before Chief chased me away. Each night, when I lay down, I kept hearing that generator sound in my head, even though it was gone. It was like the memory refused to leave. One evening, I saw Chief's son, Ibuka, standing near the gate. He was looking at me somehow, his face full of fear. When I looked at him well, he quickly turned and ran inside. That was the first time I began to suspect that there was something more to what happened that night. I kept praying for a miracle, but as days turned to months, it started to feel like God too had joined to forget us. The children stopped asking for their father. I would go to the small church down the road every Thursday to pray, crying till my eyes turned red. I told God that if Ifeanyi truly did what they said, he should show me. But deep down, I knew my husband couldn't even kill a rat, talk less of burning a whole generator. Then one day, a man came to our compound. He said his name was Chika, and that he was a journalist from Enugu. He said he was writing about people in prison who didn't belong there. When he mentioned Ifeanyi's name, my heart jumped. I didn't know it then, but that visit was the beginning of the truth, finally finding its way to the light. When the journalist came that day, he sat on the small stool in front of our room and listened as I told him everything. He didn't interrupt me. He just kept writing in his small jotter, nodding sometimes. I told him about the noise, the insult from Chief, the night of the fire, and how they carried my husband away like a thief. When I finished, he sat quiet for a while, then asked if anybody saw Ifeanyi outside that night. I said no, that everybody was sleeping, except maybe Chief's security man. The journalist said he would go to the station and the prison to ask questions. The next week, he came back again. He said he had spoken to one of the policemen who arrested Ifeanyi, and the man told him they didn't even check the generator house properly before carrying my husband. He said it was Chief that came shouting early that morning that Ifeanyi was the one, and nobody argued because he was rich and respected. When the journalist said that, my body shook with anger and fear. It was as if everything I had suspected was true. After that, he started coming often. Sometimes he would sit and talk with other tenants in the compound. He spoke with Mama Nkechi, the old woman who always woke up early to sweep the compound. One evening, she told him that she had seen Chief's son Ibuka behind the generator house that night before the fire started. She said the boy was smoking and looking afraid when she asked what he was doing there. But after the fire, she kept quiet because she didn't want trouble. The journalist looked shocked when he heard that. He wrote it down fast and said he would talk to the boy himself. I told him to be careful, that Chief was not someone who liked people asking too many questions, but he said truth had its own strength, that even lies feared it. That same week, he visited Ifeanyi in prison. He came back to tell me that my husband looked very weak but still had hope. He said Ifeanyi told him he had forgiven everyone and that one day the truth would speak for itself. When I heard that, I cried for hours. One night, around 2 weeks after the journalist last came, I heard noise outside again. I peeped through the window and saw Chief shouting at his son in the compound. The boy was crying, saying something I couldn't hear well. The next morning, I heard Chief's wife talking to one woman outside the gate, saying she could not live with a secret that was killing her. My heart started beating fast. I knew something was about to happen. That evening, the journalist came back looking serious. He said Ibuka had confessed to him privately that he was the one who caused the fire. He had been smoking beside the generator house, and the fire caught from spilled fuel. He had been too scared to tell anyone. I covered my mouth with both hands and started to shake. The journalist said Chief begged him not to publish it, that he even offered him money, but the man refused. He said he would write the truth because people like Ifeanyi didn't deserve to die in silence. That was the night I finally slept with small peace in my heart. For the first time since the arrest, I felt light inside. I didn't know what tomorrow would bring, but I knew something big was already moving in our favour. The next morning, the journalist's story came out online. Somebody from the church printed it and brought it to me. My hands were shaking as I read the headline. It said, Tailor jailed for fire he didn't start, the truth behind Chief Obekwe's generator. I sat on the stool outside, reading line by line. It said everything, how Chief used his money to silence the police, how his son caused the fire, and how my husband suffered in prison for something he didn't do. My eyes were full of tears, but I kept reading. For the first time, somebody had spoken for us. Before afternoon, the whole compound was noisy. People were reading the story on their phones and talking. Some came to ask if it was true. Even those who once crossed to the other side of the road when they saw me now came to greet me and say sorry. I didn't know whether to be happy or angry. Chief's gate was locked all through that day. Nobody came out from his house. By evening, policemen came again, but this time they didn't come for my husband. They came for Chief. They knocked and shouted for him to open the gate. After a long time, his wife opened the door, crying. People gathered and watched as the police carried Chief inside their van. Some clapped quietly, others just whispered. I stood far behind, holding my wrapper tight and thanking God silently. The next day, journalists filled the compound, cameras everywhere. They asked me questions, took pictures of my face, of the sewing machine, of the corner where Ifeanyi used to sit. I was shy, but I answered them. They said the government had seen the story online and that they were reopening the case. And my body was shaking as I listened. I didn't know whether to cry or smile. 2 weeks later, the court called for hearing. The lawyer that once ignored me before now called me madam with respect. When the judge read the new evidence, even he looked angry. Ebuka stood in the witness box, shaking as he confessed everything. He said he was sorry, that he didn't mean for the fire to happen. Chief sat beside him, looking smaller than I had ever seen him. The whole courtroom was silent except for Ebuka's voice and the sound of the judge's pen. When the judge finally said my husband was free, I broke down crying. It was like all the pain inside me poured out at once. I wanted to run to the prison that minute, but they said it would take a day or two for papers to finish. I waited outside the court till late, looking at the sky, thanking God again and again. That night, the compound was quiet in a different way. No generator sound, no gossip, just the calm that comes after a heavy rain. For the first time in many months, I slept without tears. I dreamed of Ifeanyi walking into the house again, smiling with his old soft eyes. I didn't know if it was real or just a dream, but it felt close enough to touch. The day Ifeanyi came back home, the whole compound stood still. I heard the sound of a keke stopping in front of the gate, and when I came out, I saw him stepping down slowly, thinner than before, his shirt hanging loose on his shoulders. His eyes looked tired, but when he saw me, a small smile appeared. I ran to him and held him tight. I didn't care who was watching. Tears flowed down my face, but this time, they were not from pain. The children came out screaming and hugged his legs. He bent down and held them close. For a long time, we didn't move. People in the compound watched quietly. Some came closer to greet him, saying sorry for what he went through. Even those who once called him criminal now wanted to shake his hand, but Ifeanyi just nodded and said it was all in the past. Later that evening, we sat inside our small room. It looked the same, only dustier. His sewing machine was still in the same corner, covered with cloth. He touched it gently, like it was something holy. He said he would fix it and start working again. I told him that the church people had promised to help him reopen his shop. He smiled weakly and said, God never sleeps. He only watches quietly until the right time. Outside, people were still talking about the case. Chief Obiekwe had been removed from all the committees he belonged to. Some said he moved away from the compound that same week. Others said he could no longer walk freely in town without people pointing at him. His wife stopped coming out completely, and Ebuka was sent away to live with a relative. Nobody heard generator noise again in that compound. The silence returned, but this time it sounded peaceful. Weeks later, a television crew came to film us. They said the journalist's story had gone far, and now they wanted to show it as a documentary about how poor people suffer under the rich. When I saw Ifeanyi's face on the small TV screen late, I couldn't believe it. The same man who once begged to be heard was now the reason people were talking about justice. Every evening after the children sleep, Ifeanyi and I sit outside and watch the sky. Sometimes the sound of a generator comes from far away, but it no longer makes us angry. It just reminds us of everything we survived. He always says that when you have peace, even the noise of the world sounds like music. One night, he looked at me and said he had learned something inside that prison, that sometimes suffering is like fire. It burns you, but it also shows who truly stands by you. I held his hand and told him that even though life broke us small, it didn't finish us. He smiled and we sat there till the stars came out. The night was quiet and the air was cool. The same silence that once felt heavy now felt like a blessing. And for the first time in a long time, we knew that peace had finally come to stay.